The strikers held out and claimed victory earlier this month with a detailed plan to improve wages and living standards on the island. Meanwhile, on the nearby island of Martinique, a similar strike ended 2 weeks later after officials signed an agreement that included salary increases for low-wage earners. For more on all of this, we're joined by Akuno. He is the national organizer for the Malcolm X grassroots movement and organizer with the U.S. solidarity effort with the struggle for the workers and people of Guadeloupe. He is joining us via video stream from New Orleans. Kali, welcome to Democracy Now! Explain to us exactly what this struggle in Guadeloupe was about.
Good morning. The struggle was about fundamental human rights of the people of Guadeloupe. The cost of living in Guadeloupe had been rising exponentially since kind of escalation of the crisis, particularly around food prices and rents went up beginning in 2007. And particularly the UGTG, the General Union of Workers in Guadeloupe have been raising and agitating the government of Guadeloupe in France since 2007 to kind of increase the wages and ameliorate the living conditions of the people in Guadeloupe. That led to, in December of 2008, the first strike which happened, which preceded the general strike, which commenced in January and ended in March 5th in the great victory of the people of Guadeloupe. And I think, as you mentioned, set a firm tone of struggle, I think, for international, for people all over the world and workers all over the world. But the conditions of unemployment, the conditions particularly of the youth of unemployment, the exclusion primarily of the majority of people from ownership in the island was a major concern, and it's not over. Even though there was an agreement on March 5th, many of the so-called Employers Association on the island are still refusing to pay the 100 euros that are part of the settlement demand. And so there's still aspects of the strike which are ongoing. And of course, there's a defense of Emile, who was one of the leaders of the strike. He's been charged with a racial kind of defamation charge in France. But this is really an attack to kind of undermine the moral and legitimate basis of the strike itself and undermine the agreement which France and the authorities of Guadeloupe are very insistent on doing, primarily to keep it from spreading. It also spread to Réunion, and it's now starting to have some blowback into France. So major initiative, which is still kind of part of the ongoing process.
Yeah, Kali Akuno, I'd like to ask you about that precisely, because this was a massive movement here that lasted for more than a month. It got virtually no press coverage here in the United States, but it did have an enormous impact in the Caribbean. What kind of impact did it have within France itself?
Well, I mean, there was a general strike in France, a one-day general strike in France here recently that put some tremendous pressure on Sarkozy and his government to transform and to deal with this crisis a bit different than how they've been dealing with it thus far in terms of agreeing with the basic settlement aspects of the EU plan, which is going to be discussed at the G20 summit in London. But major sectors that came out, and over 3 million people came out in the general strike, major sectors are now pressing that we need the same basic kind of rights and concessions that were granted from the French government in Martinique and Guadeloupe. Those need to be applied also in France. And so there are a section of French workers who are organizing now, to my understanding, to launch a general strike and to launch it on the example of what took place in Guadeloupe, and stay out in the streets and disrupt business and disrupt the regular order of business, the exploitation on a day-to-day level, to extend that to France. So this is something that myself and I know a lot of folks here who gave some solidarity to the struggle in Guadeloupe are really paying some close attention to, because it's going to have a long-term impact on what happens in the Caribbean possession of France, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, and some of the other so-called overseas possessions, which are still basically colonies. So we're looking at this very closely. Then the impact it's going to have, on workers in Europe and ultimately here in the United States and throughout the world, we think could be pretty significant given the nature of this crisis.
And why particularly did this develop in Guadeloupe? It reminds us a lot of the struggle that occurred in Mexico, the strike of the teachers there. What's a particular reason why this island became a leader in the struggle?
Well, number one, the General Union, the General Guadeloupe Trade Union has been a very strong and militant union throughout most of its history. It's been a very active in international solidarity. They played a pretty significant role here in New Orleans in the tribunal that we held in August and September of 2007, which was looking and investigating into the various human rights abuses of the United States government. So, they have a very internationalist outlook as part of their foundation. And the leadership that they gave to the struggle there, I think, that's kind of a fundamental thing. But the material conditions which led to it, the Guadeloupe as a French overseas possession, its economy is regulated in euros. It doesn't have its own currency. And folks get paid in euros. And with the kind of escalating prices, particularly around food starting in 2007, and in rents and in oil and gas, the living conditions of the majority of people deteriorate quickly. In the militant tradition and history of the UGTG, they stepped forward, they built a broad coalition of over 49 different unions and community organizations and popular organizations on the island. And they pressed, like I said, beginning in December, and tried to kind of meet some basic standards with the government, some basic compromises. When that wasn't met, they did what I would say they had to do, to restore some dignity to their lives and some balance in the equation of where the economy stands on the global scale, and really the government and press, the private enterprises on the island, for some justice. And they won, but like I said, it's an ongoing struggle, and people should be very much aware.
Very quickly, Akuno, there were massive protests in the streets earlier this month in France, and the biggest demonstration since Sarkozy's election. And then next week, the G20 is going to be meeting. Where do you think the significance of the Guadeloupe protest and victory fits into, and can it have any bearing on G20 and its blowback to France?
I think it will have a major impact, Amy. Workers all over Europe that I'm in contact with are using as kind of the standard bearer. And I think with the earlier victory in Bolivia, with the constitutional referendum, and also the victory that happened in Venezuela, this is one of the key early victories in this crisis I think people all over the world are looking to as an example.
Talia Akuno, thanks so much for being with us. National organizer for the Malcolm X grassroots movement, organizer with the U.S. Solidarity effort with the struggle of the workers and people of Guadeloupe. He was actually speaking to us by video stream from New Orleans. As we turn now to a major crisis, the crisis of newspapers in this country. Juan?
Well, the New York Times and Washington Post have become the latest newspapers to announce plans to downsize their staffs. On Thursday, the New York Times company said it will lay off 100 people, about 5% of its staff. In addition, the Times is temporarily cutting the pay of its non-union workers by 5% in return for 10 days leave. The layoffs and salary cuts will affect employees at both the New York Times and Boston Globe. Meanwhile, the Washington Post has announced it is offering employees another round of early retirement packages or buyouts. Washington Post publisher Catherine Weymouth said the buyouts will, quote, allow us to reduce costs and gain efficiency while we continue to restructure for the future.
As papers across the country continue to fold or downsize, policy officials and experts are contemplating a series of proposals to help newspapers stay afloat. On Capitol Hill, Democratic Senator Benjamin Cardin of Maryland has introduced the Newspaper Revitalization Act. He wants to make it easier for newspapers to become nonprofit publications. Meanwhile, two longtime media activists from the group Free Press have proposed a bold solution, a government intervention to save American journalism. In an article in The Nation magazine, Robert McChesney and John Nichols propose a multi-part journalism economic stimulus package. They call for all Americans to receive an annual tax credit for the first $200 they spend on daily newspapers, free postage for many periodicals, government funding for high school and college journalism projects, and a large expansion of funding for public and community broadcasting.